Hi, welcome back to Keep It Dirty, a podcast where my guests share their life living functionally and sustainably, and their why behind their experiences navigating through our ever changing environment. I am your host, Leslie Dowling. I am a corporate speaker passionate about creating optimal performance in the workplace, which in turn has a direct effect on an increase in revenue and productivity. And today it is my pleasure to introduce to you Jean-Paul Pham. Jean-Paul is French of Vietnamese descent with a strong American influence. For 2 decades, he has helped people boss their computers around, get computers to talk to each other, and help computers play nice with people, and realized that the biggest problems we were facing was communicating with each other and communicating with oneself. Jean-Paul turned his focus to the biggest and most complex computer that he knew of, and that is the human mind, the source of our perceptions, decisions, and actions. For the next decade, as a polymath and professional coach, Jean-Paul integrated both Western science and Eastern philosophies to help self-operating business owners scale their businesses to the next level by improving their performance, communication, and business skills. And today it is my pleasure to have Jean-Paul on my podcast. How are you today?
It's an honor to be here. Thank
And
you.
it's an honor to have you. Yeah. So as I try to keep it comfortable, relaxed, I really would love for you to share with all our viewers, our listeners, what is your driving passion, your motivation, or how how is it now? I did give your bio, and it was beautiful, really just giving to the heart of what you do now as you evolved. But how did you get onto this path as a little boy? Were you always intrigued with people and just their story? So yeah, if you could share with everybody, I'd love to hear.
Absolutely. It didn't really start that way. When I was a child, I was a very fussy kid. I still have friends and others who keep saying, "Hey, John Paul, he's the one dictating how things should be going, how things should be doing, and all of that." And I was really fussy. I did want things to be in a particular way and loved to organize it. It was so much so that my mom keeps teasing and sharing with all my friends of how when I was a baby, you know, they would bring out all these little pots, but I would have to go and taste like the 8 different flavors before I pick which one I would eat as a baby.
Mm.
That's how fussy I was when I was a kid and starting out with that. But growing up, having a very fun, loving, family-loving childhood until at 9 years old, we started traveling around the world a little bit, and we installed in Singapore. And one day, I came back from school, and as I walked through the door, I was greeted with a scene that I did not expect. Usually, when I step through the door, I have my mom greeting me, open arms, asking me, "Hey, John Paul, how was your day? How amazing it was." But that was not what came through that day. Because when I walked through the door, I found my mother sitting on a rocking chair in the mid of the living room, staring at the ceiling, tears going down her eyes. Did not know what to do. I'd rush to her as an 11-year-old boy then and tried to shake her out of it, like, "Mom, what's going on? What's going on? What's happening?" She mumbled something, but nothing came out. And that moment, one of the aides of the house came and took me aside and took me away and told me, "Jean-Paul, I think you need to leave your mom alone a little bit. No, your aunt and your uncle, my mom's younger brother and younger sister, have committed suicide." And they
Oof.
sent me to the room. For the next 2 weeks, I did everything I could as a young boy to get the thing that was most precious to me at that point, which is my mom's attention. I tried to play nice. I tried to be dumb. I tried to be stupid. I did everything I could just to try to shake her out of that. But nothing worked.
Mm.
And it seeded one question very deep in me at that point in time, which was, why did she have to suffer? And that's how that journey kind of started. Because as I started questioning and wondering, like, why did she suffer? How can we end this suffering? It took me on that trajectory of learning about people, reading books in psychology. And that was the first time that I fell into that world. And that's where that little fire got started to start paying attention to people.
Hmm. Wow, that is so
And
powerful.
it was a beautiful gift, as painful as it was at that point to lose that sense of attention from mom at that point. And like I said, I'm the eldest kid. I was fussy, so for me, it's like, and I was entitled. I deserved my mom's attention, but that was gone, and I was powerless to get any of it back. So those two drove two things: a desire to know and a desire to recover a sense of control of my life. And so that's how I got started on that journey. And that's where I noticed that I got involved into technology. Because when you're playing with computer, I'm basically dictating and telling the computers what to do. Like, I have most of the control over the computer. And that's what I learned. And so on one end, I had this journey of learning about machines and computers and all of that and growing with these. And on the other, I had all this research and readings about human psychology, what I called then, practical psychology. How does that actually apply to everyday life? And it's been fascinating as I continue my journey and became professional in the world of IT. Yet, all along, not as a profession, but as a hobby then, human dynamics and human behaviors. I wanted to know, why did people suffer? And I discovered that power that we use so lightly, which is the power of words, and how often our words create our reality. And so by learning to adjust how I use my word, I noticed I could isolate my pain, not knowing that I was doing something else. I was hiding from my own emotional pain. I disconnected myself.
Yeah.
And as I was journeying along there, at some point, my mom and my dad separated as well. And so that combination there was the foundation for me to develop this drive to keep seeking to understand.
Mm.
And so emotionally, I kind of like stalled my development at 13, 14 years old, emotionally speaking. And my mind went in overdrive to compensate for that. I was devouring every book that I could lay my hands on to understand this thing called life, understand these human dynamics. And I did not know that even as I grew up then, at 17, 18 years old, I could notice that I was looking at other people having fun, enjoying themselves. Now, I did play with them and all of that, but there always seemed to be this glass window between them and me, like a barrier between us. Never really understood why then. I only later realized that that was one of the symptoms of depression, but not recognizing it.
Mm.
So that kind of was one of the grounding pieces that laid the foundation that create the void for me to seek what I have been seeking, which is, why do human beings suffer? And how do we create a life that we want and not relive what my mom relived then?
How is she today? Is she still alive, your mother?
My mom is still alive. She's 80 years old now. She's amazingly strong as a woman. And, she has a very powerful story that really marked me both in a positive and a negative way. She was so powerful that I had created this idea that she was the one to be protected at all costs, and she was right about everything. And and I had to protect that. That was one of the downside of it. But the powerful side is that her devotion as the eldest daughter of a family to take care of her brothers and sisters and go through that and still be able to carry 2 kids with the divorce, well, not really divorce, a separation of them, and then having to raise 2 kids by herself. I mean, that's always driven me with a very strong admiration of mothers taking care of their kids all by themselves, because I've seen how hard and how difficult it is. But I can recognize the drive, the love for the children to do whatever it takes to give them a shot at life, and she did that.
How is your sibling? You said you have one other?
One younger brother. Yeah.
Okay.
He's now doing great. He still has some scars from what happened. He's not fully healed from that yet. But that's his journey. I've shared with him some of the tools. It's up to him to choose whether he wants to go there or not.
Right. And I guess what you're saying also, you have to honor and respect that is his journey. And
that is his journey.
Just you want to patch them up and restore them, and for them to see now the positivity of, look, you could have taken the high road or the low road, but you decided to rise above this and to figure this out and put the puzzles together, the pieces together to figure out human nature, human,
the human condition and the way the mind and the patterns of the mind work. And one of the things that I discovered, and it's been a very major driving force for me in how I serve my clients and I serve others, is I stopped trying to change them so that I could help them transform.
Mm-hmm.
I stopped trying to change them and help them transform. It's a very big difference there, because a lot of people will try to change others, but there is an assumption behind the desire to change somebody else. And when we want to change, so when I was younger and I tried to change my brother, because I did try that, it didn't work, but I tried, was I had projected onto him and assumed that the way he was being was bad, wrong, or negative. That is the assumption behind every change that we attempt to do in the people around us or in the world. The thing is, I'm sure you've heard the statement, whatever you resist persists. My attempt to change him was resisting the way he was. In other words, the more pressure I put on him, the more he would dig his heel into the ground and be exactly the thing that I didn't want him to be.
Mm-hmm.
And when I learned to accept that and let him be, and start to see that it was not just negative, there was other side to it that I did not recognize before. There was a polarity present. when I recognized the other side, I could let go and just appreciate him for the journey that he went through. And suddenly, without the pressure, he was free to explore himself and evolve. But that's not how I started. I started like everyone else. That was wrong. Changed that. And I was the elder brother, and I was fussy. Things had to be my way.
Mm-hmm.
But that did not work. And I love him. I wanted the best for him. But what I realized is the more pressure I was putting on him, I was blind to him. I was not judging him. I was judging my idea I had of him. But the fascinating piece with the human mind is that projection I was doing was me.
Yeah.
And that was the hard lesson that I learned way later than that. That was a reflection of me.
Isn't that
What I
called,
was seeing
like,
in him
when you
was
mirror?
me.
Is that like
We're
a mirror?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I discovered that a little later. So along my journey, I was moving forward in the IT field, doing really great. I moved up from being a simple developer, working my way up the hierarchy, being now technical team lead, the experts. I was coordinator between teams, moving my way towards being an enterprise architect. In other words, part of those who are responsible of the entire computer system of a business and designing the whole pieces within that and guiding, leading that. I was working my way up there. But at some point, as I was continuing to explore these alternative approach of the human mind, I came across EMDR, the eye movement desensitization and reprocessing approach of working on healing. And so I was curious. I went to go and do a session and give it a shot. Let's see what would happen within that. Well, we went back to that moment that I had when I stepped into the house and saw my mother for the first time. And that session was intensely painful.
I would think. Yeah.
But because the therapist was really, really good, it allowed me to sit in there and go through the motion and go through the experience of feeling the emotion until the end. And through that experience, what I had discovered is that when those experiences happened, why I went into that depressive state and not knowing it, I realized that I had disassociated myself to protect myself. Because after all, if I had felt those emotions completely when I was younger, I had created a story that I would die and nobody would be there to protect my mom nor my brother. And that was not acceptable. So I denied all my emotions so that I could do that protection. But in this moment, I got that experience where I could feel a painful emotion until the very end of its expression and still be alive. And when I connected to that, I said, okay, now all the research that I've been doing about the mind starts to make sense. Because there was all this emotional component of human being that I was just oblivious to.
Mm-hmm.
But that oblivion drove my mind to explore the world of language. How people say things, why they say what they say, and how much of people would appear in words. The way you think is expressed in words. What you believe in is shown in words. Everything you say or don't say is an expression of you, of where you are, where I am, where others are. And if you know how to listen to that, you can get a glimpse into people's mindset. And that's what I had learned along that journey as a first part of my journey to do the work that I did here. But that was not over. There was a few more pieces that came along the way. I remember walking into I was probably 26, 27 by then. I walked into a bookstore in Paris, and as usual, I walk up to the psychological bookshelves and check out, what's the new books that you're providing there. I found one that I just opened up and read one paragraph, and suddenly I started bawling in the bookstore, like really big tears. And so, immediate reaction, I closed the book, walked away. And suddenly I arrived at the stair, 2 steps down, and I just hung and held myself back. And I could hear myself say, "Hey, you don't cry, but you just did. There's something there for you." So I went back, I took the book. The book was Who Would You Be Without Your Story by Byron Katie. Took that book home, read it through, cried a few more tears, and then said, "All right, she's teaching a relatively simple process to follow called the work. Let's give it a shot." So I've been 5 years single in that time. So I thought, why not? Let's give it a shot. So I did the process on that. And as I was digging into the process of the work, there was a very deep ingrained belief that suddenly came to the surface. And the belief was, I'm not a human being if I'm not with a woman. I am not a human being if I'm not with a woman. My immediate reaction was anger. Like, how the heck can I have a limiting belief like that? And it's been 10 years I'm in personal development. Where did that come from? So, same thing. I used the word. I said, all right, that's a belief. Let's apply it there. I did the work on that. And there's an answer that came to me from deep within that said, yeah, you've been doing 10 years of personal development. You didn't work in this area of your life. And I made peace with that. So it's not that I missed it. It's just I didn't pay attention to it. It's like, cool. All right, I didn't pay attention. Now I'm paying attention. I'm getting this information. So then, second question, where the heck did this belief come from? Yeah, where did that come from? Popped to my mind. It came from, I could hear my mom screaming in front of me saying, your dad is nothing without me. Your dad is nothing without me. I was a young boy then, and I internalized that. And that's how I translated. I would be nothing without a woman next to me. So you can imagine me trying to go out there on the dating scene with that belief underlying it, how desperate I would be just to try to date someone out there.
Right. Yeah.
There's
Kind of
no chance I'm
backfires.
getting anyone with that.
That's right.
So cleared that, worked the process through, cleared that belief. And 2 weeks later, outside, I met someone. And we're still together. And we have 2 beautiful boys with us.
Isn't that amazing? Just that one aha moment of
Exactly.
part of your world, and how that made such a profound effect and change that maybe if you didn't go through that, you wouldn't be with and having these
I
2
wouldn't be
beautiful
here.
little boys, and you
Yeah,
wouldn't be here talking. Yeah, that's
exactly.
really powerful.
And what it really also ingrained with me is how, if I'm very specific, very targeted, you can hit that little layer, like really the fulcrum that's maintaining your current reality together, and knock that one piece out, and it crumbles to make space for this new world.
Yeah.
And so I continued along my journey, and there was a last major component that brought me to where I am today. And after my parents' separation, there was a very deep hatred that I had towards my dad. So much so that since I was 14 years old up until my 30s, I did not have a dad, for whoever asked the question. My mom raised us, 2 kids all by herself. We don't know who my dad is. No, that was how deep ingrained. I said I didn't have a dad. I had someone who donated scenes, and that's it. But as I was continuing my journey of learning, I went to a seminar that was teaching these universal laws. And one of them was sharing this idea that we were talking about that mirror, that everything I was seeing in them, that I liked or hated in them, is a reflection of me. And so they asked to identify the person that you resented the most to work on, to try the process. And I picked my dad. And the facilitator held me accountable to answering this question. Okay, well, you said he did that. Where did you do it? What's your way? Now, at first, I denied that. Like, I never do that. But he said, hey, if you never did it, that's a signal that you've done it. So they knew better, and they held me accountable. And I was resisting it for like a good portion of the time at first, until I slowly started accepting that I did it. Now, I did do what he did. And as I started owning all these pieces one by one, there was a very profound shift where at one point, the world around me disappeared. And for whatever reason, I saw him in front of me. After all these years, I saw him in front of me. And in that moment, I said something that I had not said in more than 20 years, maybe. And I could look at him in the eye and say, thank you. And I love you. That release confirmed my trajectory, confirmed that this is really what I am up here for, to help people transform that suffering. I did evolve, it's been like 30 years. I did shift that belief that I had, where when I was 12, 13, the goal was to eradicate suffering at all costs. Then as I started growing a little bit, I said, okay, actually not all suffering and all pain is a bad idea to not have. So I started separating. Yeah, okay, there are some pain that's acceptable, let's tolerate that, but can we get rid of all the suffering? In other words, all the emotional suffering that we could layer on top of the pains that we've experienced in life and the circumstances that we have. And then I realized that even some of that suffering is actually useful. Because sometimes we're so, as human beings, we are so blind and so deaf that we need that intense pain to actually get out of there or move.
Right.
Because we were ignoring all the signals that were before that. So part of what I do now is, as I'm helping these business owners, is to identify these pieces in their mind, how they're creating their own suffering, big or small, and then decide consciously, is it useful? Then let's consciously use that. If it's not useful, let's consciously take that away. But to build awareness on top of that, not just judges as negative or positive, good or bad. It's to look at, there's a bigger, deeper picture that is at play.
Mm-hmm.
But when you get a glimpse of it, it changes so much. And I got that experience then, and that's where I really connected the dots with this part of me that this is what I've been actually doing. I was even looking back, I was asking myself, like, how is this journey of coaching people, helping people, how is that even related with the IT field? But then I started looking back at what I was doing in the IT field and how I was problem solving, bug fixings, getting things to work, the things that stopped working, get it to work again, to work properly, clean up the mess that was happening here, doing firefighter work and clearing all of that. That was technological healing. And so I realized that at my very deepest core, healing was my purpose. Now, medicine is not the one that I'm interested in. The healing of the mind, yeah. Learning about that and helping people see that. So behind that, it's my mission today to invite as many people as I can to explore and experience what I call the world beyond morality. There's a world that exists right here in front of our eyes that is beyond the notions of good and bad, right or wrong, positive and negative. And when you can step in that space, even temporarily, your world shifts because now you see opportunities where before you saw pain. And it is something that is very powerful for business owners and entrepreneurs because that's the livelihood of the business. What people see as a problem, as a complaint, as a pain, for a business owner, for an entrepreneur, that's an opportunity. Is there enough people having this complaint, this pain? Can we do something about it? And can we sell them something? Can we help them eliminate that? You can't see that opportunity if you're judging it to be bad. But when you allow yourself to recognize, and it's not easy. I'm not saying it's not something that can go overnight. But with practice, it gets easier as you go along. But you can explore that world. And that's kind of my mission now, is to invite as many people as I can to go and explore that world. Because when you see that the opportunities are endless, and together the impact is magnificent.
So, are you still connected and have a relationship with your father? Is he still alive?
My father is not alive. I learned later on that he had passed away before that.
Oh, sorry to hear that. Yeah.
But it was one of the beautiful gifts that he had, because when people die, and this is a very interesting thing about loss. I like to share with people who have experienced a loss that people, when they pass away, when they leave your life, when they leave, it creates a hole in us. And we feel that emptiness. Like there's something missing. And we're often going to try to fill that up with things outside. Go drink, do drugs, go sport, become a workaholic. Do something to forget that we have that hole. But what we don't realize is that that hole is not meant to be filled by anything outside of us. That hole is for us to fill with another part of us. Your light is what's meant to fill into that space and nothing else. So we don't know that. We're not educated to it. We don't know that that's a possibility. So we go through the stages of grief and we suffer from that. And we think that grief is an internal experience that will never end. It's not true. It's not true. My father passing away actually made space for me. Because for a long time after my parents' separation, I unconsciously had this fear that he would find us and cause more problems. It was unconscious. I was not, saying it out loud and being conscious about it. But then I realized that when I heard him passing away, I was not grieving his loss. I felt relieved. A weight dropped off. That's when I realized that I was carrying that. And only when I released that, then I could grieve him.
Mm-hmm.
But the gift that announcement that I heard offered me is that space for me to step into, to radiate more and not hide as much. Because before I was kind of hiding. I was not realizing that it was unnecessary to hide. But I was hiding anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And so that became a gift for me that I thank him for. Because now I got the space to go and share this message and not be afraid of that. And so often when people leave at first, we have that grief, we have that pain, or we have that relief. But we don't realize that space that gets created, that void. Because even with the pressure, when the pressure goes, there's an emptiness that's created. There's a void that is there. Something's going to fill that. It's meant for me. It's meant for you. It's meant for whoever has lost someone to fill that space up. And when you do, you realize that. And this, I think, is the most beautiful gift that I've had the honor and opportunity to give others, is the realization that what you thought you lost, you didn't lose. It took on a new form.
No, that's a beautiful way of presenting and looking at that.
Yeah. There's a narrative of how you look at it. And there's the actual experience of it. And when you have the actual experience of it, it's not, that attempt to say, hey, whoever you lost is in your heart. It's not a saying anymore to cope.
Mm-hmm.
It's an actual experience deep within. And so I thank my dad for having disappeared from my life. I thank my dad for having passed away. I appreciate him for being here when he was here. I appreciate him for not being here when he was not here. Because in either way, he was still teaching me.
So, do you have any words of wisdom for your children? I know they're still young, but do you think someday you'll share some parts of these stories for them to um, kind of hear the history of your background? Because, one day they will, well, Daddy, what about your, grandpa or grandma, or how did they meet, or what happened,
Yeah.
Um,
Well, once they ask, probably I will definitely share those stories. But I know that along the way, part of what I'm hoping already and I've started to guide them towards is to, without taking away their childhood,
mhm,
teach them some of these principles. Like I know my son, for instance, had at one point, we had one of his uncle passed away and he was grieving. And I I walked him through the process that I walk my clients through. It took 20 minutes and his heart opened because he saw the new form of his uncle.
mhm.
So he realized that uncle was not gone. And the beauty with children at that age, they don't resist the process as much as adults do. So it goes way faster.
Yeah, we're a little more jaded and gone through a lot of different
Yep.
experiences. So you're setting a
Absolutely.
beautiful foundation for your children to grieve in a healthy way and to
Yeah.
also see that light that they will always be around us. There's a
Yeah.
new way of putting on a different set of lens to see his uncle.
Exactly. The thing
Mhm.
is, so much of what we do as human beings is through the lens of gain and loss. Having a tool like this that, I thank my mentor, Dr. John DeMartini, for having taught us these tools. It's very beneficial in the world of business because it's a constant shift. You're losing here, you're gaining there, you're losing money, you're gaining this. You're transferring things. And when you start recognizing the dynamic of transformation, first, you don't stress as much because you see there's a grander picture that is happening. You can move more effectively with that. And you can find where those missing pieces are. So for instance, I had a client who's been stagnating in his business. He's earning like 6 million a year. It's been like 3-4 years, but just can't seem to go up. There's a small team doing great, selling a product, very valuable, but just could not get anywhere up. He was stuck there. So I was asking, can you help me on that? And he said, no, I don't know. Let's check first. And we started looking into his vision of the future, what was going on there. And he realized as he settled in to actually look at his vision of the future, there was something missing in it. For him to take the business in the next level, there's something missing in it. And what was missing was a woman in his life. He had no one to share the wealth he created with. So I said, okay, so the goal is to get you a girlfriend. Well, I knew how powerful, that single idea was just to get someone. So the thing that we went is when we went through his history of relationship and grieved all of them. I think he had 5, 6 girls before, and we grieved all the relationships. All those women grieved each and every one of those. Without a doubt, 3 weeks later, when he came back, he said he found someone.
So you're a matchmaker too.
Without trying to be one, but apparently it works.
But that's beautiful. So he had to go through each relationship to grieve, to process, to be able to open up the doors for new beginnings.
Yeah.
And
it really puts you in an energetic space where you can receive. You're not pushing people away.
Yeah.
And the beauty was, not only did he have the tool to grieve that and clear those, he also had the tool to mirror back what he was seeing in others, so what he was seeing in her, to actually learn to appreciate and love her for who she is and not the idea that he had of her.
Yeah, that's so important. Yeah.
Because it's a very funny thing, as I help people, grow their business, but sometimes the block to, once he got the girl, the business started going up again. So there was a relationship between those two. That's why I like to coach people holistically, because I don't know where the actual leverage point is. If I stay only in business, I could miss the leverage point is actually in a family dynamic. There's a son that has a problem that is distracting them from the business. So to get their attention back to the business, we need to dissolve the issues related with the son or the spouse or something like that. So, yet the funny thing that I notice, as the more I get the opportunity to work with people like this, is this very strange phenomenon in love relationship where the person that we fall in love with, we fall in love with them in an attempt to love ourselves by proxy, because it's too hard to love ourselves directly. There's this very common exercise in relationship coaching, which is make a list of all the qualities that you want in your partner. I'm sure you've seen that. Okay, I want him to be handsome. I want him to be, smart, intelligent, like whatever that list is. Well, we spoke about mirroring earlier on. What you see in others is within you. So the funny thing is, when I take that list that they put down there, this is the ideal person. And I said, I'm going to strip up that name. I'm going to write your name on top. Suddenly, you actually read a description of yourself, the part of you that you've disowned, that you think you don't have. That's why you need the other person to give it to you. You need the other person to complete you. But when you realize that you already have all of that, it's just in a form that you're not recognizing, then you're not an incomplete person finding someone to complete you. You're a whole person finding someone else to journey with. And it creates a much healthier dynamic. It creates a very different, healthy dynamic in the relationship, because you don't need them. And if you don't need them, then why would you be with them? Because you choose to.
Yeah.
And it's a totally different experience when you go there. And so when you have this dynamic that you can have in relationship with a spouse, well, the world of business is a world of relationships. Those principles apply. I agree that there's no sex involved, but the dynamics of it applies in business.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so suddenly the business will bloom, because the lessons of your private life play and layers into your public life, into your business life, and the other way around.
Absolutely. Yeah. How can we be a role model to others if we're not feeling self-love, self-worth, really just optimally being in a good place in the present moment? If we're compromised, right? And not going through the ebbs and flows of life of just experiencing and feeling really good about yourself. So your reflection and on the people that you're working with for, or people that are working for you, that optimization of the experience of getting to that next platform of feeling good about yourself, right? It's like a domino effect where your client had like a hurdle with relationships, right? Or didn't realize. And then once he went through the process of the relationships he was in, he was able to open doors to then find somebody, and also the business started to flourish and do well and improve. And so it's really fascinating when you think about it. And I think the grieving and the loss also, when I lost my mother 2 years ago, it's just human nature, feeling all those human emotions. But now, where I'm in today, I don't think I'd be able to get through what I have just gone through if it wasn't for the strength that my mother gave me, losing her and having to be strong in getting through that process. I probably wouldn't have been where I am today. So I'm blessed, and I thank her for that. But I wouldn't have looked at that a year ago as to where I am today if it wasn't me going through everything I did.
Exactly. And that's part of sometimes the misunderstanding of the pain and suffering that we go through, that they're not always to be eliminated. Some of them are just to go through the motion and the experience because it's the lesson that you're going through. It's the transformation that you're going through.
Yeah.
And it's painful. Absolutely. But if you're willing to hang on and go through it with proper support and all of that, so you don't get lost along the way, the other side, you're stronger, you're more powerful, and you're ready for your next challenge. God's life will throw you the next challenge.
It's the beauty of human nature, and evolving and growing and reflection. And as much as we hate to see loss of loved ones, family, and friends, it's life, and it's just the way you navigate through this, and to get the help that you need when you do need help. And it's okay. I think a mom of 3 boys, and it's getting better. Years ago, it's be tough. You can't show your emotions. That was my generation as a little girl. The boys have to be tough. They can't, and I see that changing. I see the next generation being a little softer. Boys are being more expressive, but it's still that stigma. I think that's still very
It's
strong.
a very interesting dynamic. You're absolutely right. There is that stigma, but there's also the oversharing that goes on the other side at this point. They haven't found that proper middle ground yet, that yes, it's important to recognize your emotions, but not at all the time, at all the moments. There's a time and place for each.
Yes.
If you're a leader guiding a whole organization and you're crying every 5 minutes for this or for that and reacting emotionally about everything, then you're very ineffective as a leader. But that doesn't mean you're not supposed to do that. It's supposed that there is a time and place for that. You can't do it in front of everybody, but you do need to do it in front of that group of people, that support group that you've chosen carefully to be able to be fully open and totally vulnerable towards. It's not meant to be vulnerable with everybody. And there's a wisdom to identify where and when to be. I find that some of the younger generation today becomes overly emotional all the time, and that's why they get all these nicknames about being snowflakes and fluffy and can't handle difficulties anymore. And there are a lot of jokes around that, but it's not their fault. But there is that trajectory, there's this swing to the other side where we went from the extreme where no emotions, none whatsoever. I was part of that. And swinging to that as all emotions and no self-control, self-awareness whatsoever. And we need to come back to the mid-ground. So I'm waiting for the swing to adjust itself to come back to the mid-ground. Because you need both. We need both to grow.
So, Jean-Paul, what is on your bucket list? What is it that, and I hate this cliche, in 5 years, where do you think you're going to be? No. What is in store for you for 2025? Maybe you could share with everybody, viewers and listeners, how we could reach out to you. I would love to continue having you on my show. I think it's just fascinating. So many shares and your wisdom of just empowering others, of creating that light bulb going off and saying, you know what, maybe I need to explore this in order for me to feel that I could get to the next stage, whatever that is in my journey in life. So how can we reach out to you? How can people find you?
Yeah, absolutely. There are 3 places where you can find me. You can find me off my website, phamconsulting.com. That is one place. You can find me on LinkedIn. But for most, you can find me on Chatter Social at this point in time.
And how
Those
can
are some of the places
people,
can
the Chatter, because I was, I'm slowly integrating back into it, but are you able to send invites, or it went public at this point where people could just go and
we can
download
still
the
send
app?
invites. It's going to be public relatively soon. We're still finishing the team is finishing the public beta run at this point in time. And there are still invitations available for a few people. They're not providing any new invitations yet, but you can still request it if you have people you want to bring on. They're actively building the new version of Chatter right now. So we're expecting an extraordinary V2 version coming out very soon.
Wonderful. So I always ask everybody, do you have any kind of hidden hobby that not everybody knows that you enjoy doing, a craft or something that you could share with everybody now?
I do like dancing. I do a couples dance called West Coast Swing.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Is that the
It's
rage
the
in Paris
community in
now?
which I've met my girlfriend. So
Oh, isn't that wonderful? So is that the
yes.
rage now in Paris, the Western dancing, or is that
Well,
something you've
it
always...
came to France about I think now 20 years ago, and
Oh,
it's been growing. Like even in the competitive circuit of West Coast Swing, one of the highlights this year is that we had a French couple who won
wow. That's wonderful.
the
Congratulations.
international competition, which is
Yeah,
dominated by American, because the dance is American, so obviously
sure.
American
Yeah.
dances are first. But for the first time, we had one of the major categories of choreographed competition was won by one of the French dancer, and I think it's a Hungarian dancer as well, as a couple
Hmm.
together. So we had a French on the top podium, right?
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. And do you have fiction or nonfiction, or a superhero that you've always been inspired, or have something on the wall that inspires you, somebody? Got you on that one.
Well, it's selecting which one to put forth. I think the
Oh,
most dominant one that I had was when I was younger. There was a video game that I really enjoyed playing with called Final Fantasy,
mm,
and a lot of my inspiration comes from characters from those type of stories.
interesting.
Mm.
Yeah. So, is there anything else you would like to share with our viewers and listeners?
Well, what I like to remind everyone is that we're all lights. So we consider yourself like a light bulb. And sometimes we put shades on it with different shape and form. And when you're looking outside, you see the projection of your shadows, of your shades. Every time you do a personal work, you remove a shade. But you can also remember that inside the shades, you're the whole light. No matter how dark it seems outside, there's light inside. Because I know even, as a community, there are people who are suffering. I'm very well aware of that. And I just want to, until you can get the proper help that can support you and help you transform, just remember that you are a light. And there's light waiting for you.
Thank you. Always so powerful. Our conversations, your shares. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your late evening. What time is it in Paris right now as we speak?
As we speak, it's 1:30 right now.
Okay. All right. So with that, I want to thank you. I also would love for you to come back to be on my show because you have so many wonderful just bits of information and knowledge, and it's always such a pleasure to speak with you, Jean-Paul. And again, I wanted to thank my viewers and listeners for listening now this evening. And just always remember, ground with Mother Earth and keep it dirty. Take care, and we'll see you around.
You're around.
Bye.